Mayor Joe Roscoe, who we're very appreciative of being here to give some opening remarks. And Mayor, all yours.
Good afternoon and welcome to Island Paradise, Key Biscayne. Now, for all you cities here, no, you can't annex us, okay? Sorry, but we're really very glad you're here. Truly a pleasure for all of us to be here at the Village of Key Biscayne's first Sustainability Summit, hosted by our fantastic Sustainability Advisory Board. Today marks a great milestone for our village. It reflects who we are and what we value as a community. We are a small island with a big heart and an even greater sense of responsibility to one another, to our children, and to our natural environment. Sustainability has always been central to Key Biscayne's story. The beauty of our community depends on thoughtful stewardship. This summit is about partnership. It's about being here with you and working towards a better tomorrow. The challenges ahead are real, as all of you know. From rising seas to aging infrastructure, from waste management to energy use, we must face these challenges head on and do our best to innovate, to adapt, and to lead by example. And how do we accomplish this? Well, through the power of community. Time and time again, Key Biscayne has shown that when we unite with purpose and vision, we can achieve real and lasting progress. I want to thank the members of the Sustainability Advisory Board for their leadership in organizing today's event and for their ongoing commitment to protecting and enhancing our island's natural and built environment. Today's conversations will help guide our next steps as we plan, as we invest, and as we act to ensure that Key Biscayne and all our communities remain vibrant, they're safe, sustainable, and communities that we all cherish. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring deeply about our island, our natural environment, and for being part of this Sustainability Summit, a first. I look forward to seeing the ideas and the partnerships and the possibilities that can grow by this collaboration. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Next up, we have our village manager, Steve Williamson. Thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you, Derek. I feel like the mayor and I are on the circuit here. So we just came from our Thanksgiving and recognition ceremony for our employees, and it's one of my favorite times of the year in order to recognize the great people who work here at Key Biscayne. But not only do we have great employees, we also have great volunteers. And so I want to thank Derek and his Sustainability Advisory Board for what he does and for what the entire team does for working with the administration as well as all of our groups across the village. I see Helena over there. If you don't know what she does with zero waste culture, you need to learn what she does. It's amazing stuff. She takes things and turns it into dirt. Is that a good explanation? Very good dirt. But she's just not the only one in the community that we have. You know, we are very proactive in how we use our community program and events money. We support Fill-A-Bag. We support battery recycling. We support, what else do we support, Derek? We support a lot of different programs. Of our 31 community programs, we fund 6 things that are very focused on sustainability. But what's beautiful about it is we bring the other groups in, like the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the business, I forgot what they call it, but the children's business program, you know, little kids trying to do business. And then we integrate them with the programs that they do. So there's that cross-fertilization of learning what sustainability is about. So we got some great programs. We got some great people doing this work. I do want to recognize our Chief Resilience Officer in the back, Roland Samimi, does a great work. We also have the liaison of the board, Councilmember Bracken as well back there. And look, our Vice Mayor just jumped up, just voted back in last night. So thank you for coming, Vice Mayor. So appreciate you guys being here. Enjoy the facilities. I think if you haven't done it, I think Dave showed where you got to go to do your things. We got a lot of good food over there. But welcome. Really appreciate you being here. Unfortunately, I got to go back and do some work. That's my job. I think the mayor's going to stick around. And I'm really looking forward to hearing about what you guys talk about today. So thank you very much. And if I don't see you, have a great Thanksgiving.
Gentlemen, thank you so much. Much appreciated. So before we get started, I do have a couple of things that I would like to address. First of all, some of our board members were kind enough to donate some old political signs. So these were upcycled, which we're happy about. Source, which is a local company that does water in aluminum, sponsored this event, and they provided those for this event. So you'll see those. I know a bunch of you have them on the table. In addition to that, Dave Dubler from volunteercleanup.org has donated these recycling bins to make sure that those aluminum cans do get recycled. And if you are looking to have those at an event, talk to this guy right here. We have a fantastic board. We're really excited for the progress we've been able to make over the last 2 years. We are new. We're about to step into our third year. But I just wanted to say thank you to the amazing work of our board for helping to put this together. No small undertaking. So if you are a part of the Village of Key Biscayne Sustainability Advisory Board, please stand up. Maria, Jackie, Michael, Karen, Elena. We also have Councilmember Bracken as our liaison. There you are. And also our staff liaison, Alvaro. So thank you so much for everything, guys. Before we get into the first panel, which Dave is going to be talking about, I did want to share with you a little story. So just reference this image. It'll make sense in a second. In the early 1900s, Rjukan was a remote mountain valley where sunlight disappeared for nearly half the year. This is in Norway. The town's founder, Sam Aid, an engineer and an industrialist, faced a challenge that wasn't just environmental, but existential. Without sunlight, the town struggled. People were isolated, productivity slowed, and morale dimmed during the long winters. But I didn't accept that limitation. He rallied engineers, scientists, and local craftsmen to do something no one had ever done before. They built giant mirrors high up in the surrounding cliffs, perfectly aligned to capture the sunlight and bring it down into the heart of the valley. In 1913, Rjukan became the first community in the world to bring light to itself through innovation and collaboration. A century later, those mirrors still shine. That story captures the essence of why we're here today. Like Rjukan, our communities face challenges shaped by geography and climate. Rising seas, hotter days, stronger storms. But also like them, we have something powerful in common, the capacity to innovate together. No single town, city, or board can reflect the sunlight alone. But together we can illuminate a path forward, one built on shared solutions, open dialogue, and the kind of creativity that only happens when collaboration happens across boundaries. The summit represents more than a meeting. It represents momentum, a shared recognition that sustainability and resilience in South Florida will be built not by isolated efforts, but by collective ones. By scientists and city planners, teachers and engineers, policymakers and residents, all working together to reflect light into the future. So as we begin today, let's remember Rjukan. Let's bring our mirrors to the mountain. Let's make sure that every idea, every innovation, and every partnership we forge here reflects the best of who we are, a region defined not by the challenges we face, but by how we face them together. Thank you so much. And with that said, I would like to please welcome up Dave Dubler. And I would like to invite Karen up here to introduce Dave, because you know him a heck of a lot better than I do, and I just will not do the amazing work that this man has done justice. So Karen and Dave, you can stay up here, it's okay. And Karen, please come on up here. Thank you so much.
I'm Karen Bieber-Feudernick. I'm the board of Sustainability Advisory Board for Village of Key Biscayne. I am also on the steering committee for the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Coalition, of which Dave is co-chair. So I've had the pleasure, immense pleasure, of working with Dave for a couple of years now. Once you speak with Dave, there are three things that will always stay with you, and that is always show up, never give up,
Never go away.
never go away. You know, really in anything, those are words to live by, but certainly in what we're striving for when we're talking about solutions, large solutions, small, I think that's really important. So whether it's on a small scale community or up in Tallahassee, I think those are just, you know, three incredible takeaways. The life of Dave. He also is the co-founder of volunteercleanup.org, which I'm sure many of you have heard of. It was a pleasure for me to have invited Dave and for Dave to have accepted the invitation to speak today. He is going to talk about how to get things done. And if there's anyone who knows how to get things done, it's Dave. So thank you so much.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Dave Dobler. Honored to be here today. I do work with Karen on the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Coalition, where we are a community of advocates who are working to protect and restore Biscayne Bay. And when Karen told me about this idea I was super excited. I said, all right, Karen, what do you want to talk about when you bring all of these committee members together? And, we bantered back and forth a little bit, and she said, well, I'd really love for you to talk about how you get stuff done. And so the topic of my presentation is getting stuff done in your committee. She wanted to name it something a little something else, but also wanted to make this PG-13. So I'll give a little intro to myself, my rules of advocacy and pro tips for maximizing your committees. So I've been working on marine debris issues in Biscayne Bay and Miami Beach since 2012, when I discovered the problem while kayaking in the bay and discovering just tremendous amounts of trash floating around, and I would go and pick it up, and then I just started getting more and more curious about that, about where it was coming from, why we care, how does it impact our communities, and what do we do about it. I really started diving into how my local city government works and trying to figure out solutions to problems. And I ventured out well beyond marine debris in my tenure because I was tired of picking it up, and I wanted to figure out how we keep it out of the water in the first place. If I describe myself as a reasonable environmentalist, some people would think I throw a few elbows here and there, but I believe that we can implement logical and financially responsible strategies to create a more sustainable city for residents, visitors, and the business community to enjoy and succeed. Anybody ever heard of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs? Right. Well, when I first learned about them a couple years ago, I was like, oh, I fit into 6, 12, 13, and 14. Those are the kind of areas that I prefer to work in because of my expertise and knowledge. I am co-founder of volunteercleanup.org. I'll tell you about that in a second. I am the current chair of the City of Miami Beach Sanitation Committee. I am the current co-chair of the North Bay Village Sustainability and Resilience Task Force. I am a current member of the county's Biscayne Bay Watershed Management Advisory Board. I was formerly the chair of the City of Miami Beach Sustainability Committee for 6 of the 8 years that I served. And I spent 2 years as the chair of the City of Miami Beach Marine Waterfront Protection Authority. I'm also a co-chair on the steering committee for the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Coalition. So basically, I have discovered the potential of sitting on committees. Very briefly about volunteercleanup.org, because this is my main project. We are a free community resource. We're a web platform that connects people who are organizing beach, neighborhood, and shoreline cleanups with volunteers who want to join. We are effectively Eventbrite, but for cleanups. So organizers can recruit, manage, and communicate with volunteers, and volunteers can search by zip code to find cleanups and sign up for a weekly email of events near them. For those of you who know Manny and the Key Biscayne Foundation, all the cleanups that Manny does in the mangroves, he posts his events to my platform, among any others. There's about 6 to 8 cleanups happening every single weekend. And if you haven't been on one of Manny's mangrove cleanups, I promise you go. It's so much fun. I love them. We have helped coordinate through our platform over 5,000 cleanups, pulling out over 1 million pounds of debris out of South Florida. There's 6 to 8 cleanups happening every single weekend, so I encourage you to join a cleanup or organize your own. I am a clean water advocate, and so I have a couple of rules of advocacy that I like to share with everybody because what we do is hard. It takes a long time. It can be a little frustrating at times. It can be a lot frustrating at other times. But my rules of advocacy is rule number 1 is always show up. Rule number 2 is never go away. Number 3 is have a volume knob. And number 4 is protesting is fun, but the real work happens inside the building. So get a seat at the table, ideally at the head of the table. How do you make change? So on the left-hand side, we have some folks protesting. I love making signs. When I'm about 75 years old, I guarantee that you will find me on the MacArthur Causeway holding a sign. I love it. I think it's a lot of fun. And there is a real need for that, right? People getting outside just kind of, But that's actually not how the real change happens. The real change happens when you are sitting inside the building and you're in the room making decisions. And so that's the path that I went on beginning in about 2010. So I like having seats at the table and solving problems. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of give you some tips about how I've been really effective, and hopefully some of these things can help you in your sustainability committees, in any of the work that you may do. This is the first time I've given this presentation, so it may not quite slot in, but these are just some of my pro tips, right? So the first one is it's really important to understand how your city works. It's not just the commissioners. You don't just see a problem and like, oh, I got to call the mayor, I got to call the commissioners. Because all they're going to do is pick up the phone and they're going to call somebody from staff and like, hey, I got somebody who's got a problem with this. Can you go solve it, right? So first is learn how your city works. The community drives conversations. Elected officials make the policy and staff implements the policy. I was very fortunate in 2010 to have joined the Miami Beach Leadership Academy, which was an 8-week curriculum that went through how my city works. And I met all of the different departments, and I understand the process of how things actually happen, and that was incredibly helpful. They just restarted it back up, so if you're from Miami Beach, definitely recommend doing that program. And if you're not in Miami Beach, well, maybe you still register and go anyway, because there's a lot of similarities between the municipalities and how they operate. I like to think that committees are a conduit between good ideas and policy and the elected officials. Your community members who they appoint you because they see that you have something unique that you can provide, knowledge and education. Elected officials have to be experts in everything, right? And a lot of times they have a very high level knowledge of things, but you know, some of them don't know about stormwater. They may not know about recycling. And so they appoint people to these committees who they think can help be trusted advisors for them. I recommend building relationships with all of the elected officials, specifically the ones that appointed you, and keep that conversation and that line of communication going. I have found that my commissioners love the ideas that we bring to them. Some of them, they don't like so much, but that's okay. If you make a motion or an LTC, we call them in Miami Beach LTCs, letters to commission, when you make a motion or an LTC, that doesn't mean nothing's going to happen with that unless you take additional action and you take that LTC and you shop it around and you lead conversations about that. I don't just make a motion or an LTC unless I'm prepared to follow it up with elected officials and staff to ensure that it's discussed. I used to do this as I was going through my photos, that's me from like, I don't know, 2013, 2014, before I learned that long hair looks good on me. And what I used to do as chair, I would actually go to committee and I would go speak during the, we called it the Stutnik hour, I call it the 2-minute rant hour. And I would show up at the commission meetings to give updates on what we talked about in our sustainability committee, right? I wanted to make sure that my time was being used to maximum effectiveness. And so I would use the Stutnik hour to give updates and to give ideas. And a lot of times the conversations would happen right on the dais. I recognize one of my flaws is that a lot of times I'm kind of a lone wolf. I will just go run off and do whatever I'm going to do. But recognizing that flaw in myself, I want to make sure that I give a platform for everybody's voice to be heard. And so what we started doing at the beginning of the year in our sustainability committee, we would do a note and vote for collaboration. I wanted to make sure that the quietest in our group have an opportunity to present and share the ideas that they wanted. And so what we would go through this exercise where everybody would have a stack of sticky notes and everybody would write their ideas down or topics that they wanted to discuss. We'd put them all on the whiteboard. We'd kind of group them and organize them. And then we would each have 10 sticky dots and we would vote on the ideas and the topics that we all agreed were worthy of having a conversation about. And so we then built the agendas off of those things that we all agreed were the things that we wanted to talk about. So it's a way to make sure that everybody's voice can be heard and that they can be included in that. It was always a fun process, and they still do that at the Sustainability Committee. I also like to tell people that if you come up with an idea, you got to lead it, right? You don't just say, I want to talk about recycling and then wait for somebody else to do it. If it's your idea, if it's your project, I want to support you in that, but you have to kind of take the reins. You know where you're going with this conversation. You go do the research, you present to us, find what you want to do. And my role was always to support those people who had really good ideas, and I wanted to give them the floor. And then, a lot of things I would lead on myself. So everybody should be responsible for the idea and solution generation. If someone wants to discuss an idea, they need to do the homework, present the knowledge, and present solutions or ideas, and then open it up to the floor for conversation. And members, all the members should come prepared. So the other thing is that I never want to have a 30-minute conversation about something without any next steps, without an output. And so I always told people, if you're going to present something, I want you to have emotion. I want you to have a next step. Why are you talking to me? Why are you bringing this here to our committee? What action do you want me to take, right? And so I always set the floor with everybody like, I want you to, don't just like, okay, there's my presentation, thank you very much, goodbye. That's just education, right? I can sit on YouTube and learn about that. I want to know what we're going to do about that. I always invited experts or technologies to present if I had an idea. I would invite, for example, I had, Andy?
Your idea, you lead. There's a whole bunch of different people from different municipalities here. How do you recommend, if we're trying to assemble a coalition of different people, to avoid the fact that it's just one person in here that takes the lead?
One person takes the lead.
No, but how do you avoid the fact that it's only, so we go back, how do you avoid that? Let's just say Sylvia, she has the idea. We're trying to build a coalition. So she goes back tomorrow, she has her idea, and she gets no help from anybody else. So it's her idea, she leads. So we just go back to doing exactly what we've been doing for however many years. How do we build beyond your idea, you lead, into a broader coalition of the idea, we lead?
So it's an interesting question, right? And the reason why I say your idea, you lead is because, first of all, I have a million ideas a day. I can't implement all of the ideas that I have, and so I open source a lot of my ideas and the things that I'm working about. If Sylvia presents an idea, it is her job to recruit others who want to help her. It is not that that person has to do all of the work. It is that is the person who is going to make sure that that happens. And so if you can't get anybody to help you, maybe your idea is either not worth pursuing because nobody else wanted to invest the time, or maybe you're not with the right group of people to get the help, and so you need to seek out external. Or if you think it's that big of a deal, you sometimes have to do things on your own. Right? So this is not to say that if it's your idea, great, go for it. Let me know how it works. You have to pitch your idea to other folks, and then hopefully the team that you're with, the group that you're working with, supports you in those ideas. Like, what is my role in this? Karen had this idea to bring all of these folks together, and I said, how can I help you? And she said, I need this and this and this. And I was like, well, I'll do this for you, right? And here I am. So if you can't sell your idea to other folks to bring them on board with you, then you have some work to do. Cool? All right. So this is one of those situations where I kind of had to take the lead on things. An early adopter of electric vehicles. I bought a Tesla. I lived in a condo. I didn't have a place to charge it. I bought the car, figuring that I will figure it out once I buy the car. Easier said than done in Miami Beach, right? And so I needed charging. So I actually picked up the phone, I called Tesla. I found out who the team was that in South Florida who did the charging stations. I brought them in. We made a motion. I introduced them to the parking department. And all of a sudden, now we have 2 Tesla supercharger stations.
That was a long time ago when you bought your first Tesla.
Yeah, that was a long time ago. And it was literally 2.5 years before these things got installed, right? So, you know, fortunately they had it at Brickell, but that was kind of a pain in the rear end. But when you bring in the experts, just like what Karen's doing today, I'm very excited to see Melissa's conversation beyond when we're talking about waste, right? She found somebody who knows about this stuff and we can learn from, right? And so you don't have to have all the answers, you just have to know how to find those answers. I observe within my community. I spend the time to walk around, eyes open, starting to look and see where our problems are, right? And I discovered in Miami Beach, all throughout, we don't label any of our recycle bins or landfill bins, like none of them. The one on the left, actually on both sides, those are both recycling carts, right? You can't tell which one. And the city wants to know why we have a 40–50% contamination rate. Why can't anybody recycle right? Well, you know, they were like, well, we'll put up some ads on Facebook. No, this is the first step, right? This is the transition point when people are making decisions. This is the perfect place to make to educate people. So you observe within your community and you see what's wrong, and then you think about what the solutions might be. And sometimes they percolate. They take a little while to stew in your mind and to brew. And then you're like, oh, I've got that. Here's an idea. But I also observe when I travel. I look to see what everybody else is doing, and I think that's one of the things that Karen is trying to accomplish here, is to see what everybody else is doing. I love to travel. On the left-hand side, you see, you know, we've got a waste crisis in Miami, if you guys haven't heard, and I hate MIA. Not because it's a bad airport, but because I can't even refill my water bottle. Right? It is so frustrating, and I've spoken with MIA and they won't budge on this because I know that they want to just sell plastic water bottles, right? It's frustrating, makes me want to choke them. And so I harass quite a bit. On their Twitter page, you're going to see me posting, you know, water refill stations in Atlanta. But also at the top here, they're actually doing, I don't remember where this is, but they had a sink at the front of the TSA checkpoint, where they encourage you to empty your water bottle out, go through TSA checkpoint, and they have water refill stations on the other end. Like, wow, that's great. You know, in Miami, they're just like, hey, throw your bottle away. Wait, but it's a hydro flask. Throw it away. Frustrating. This is in Colorado. We went to a festival here in Colorado, and they had their public works team built this filtered water station for all of their festivals and events. And I was like, I love that. I snap pictures all the time. You know, Apple keeps wanting me to upgrade to get more storage in iCloud. And I'm gonna have to pony up because I just take so many pictures of everything, but I never know when I'm gonna use that picture. I also recommend that it's not only us that are the eyes of our community, but all of the residents can serve to be eyes of the community. And so, a lot of people know that I know what's going on, and so they send me stuff. On the left-hand side here, Miami-Dade County was doing some bridge work on the Venetian Causeway, and they installed this floating walkway. Underneath it was just blocks of bare foam, and it was making a tremendous mess. My friend Mike sent me this, so I got on that. On the far right-hand side, they were doing construction work on one of the stormwater systems, and he took a video, and when they cracked that open, water bottles kept flowing out. And I was like, oh, maybe that's why our streets are flooding, right? There's no way for the water to evacuate. Maybe this is why we've got so much trash in the bay. And then on the bottom, what looks like a diesel truck is actually an outfall. After we discovered this and we harassed Public Works about their stormwater system, they built new pump stations, but they didn't include injection wells. They convinced the county not to do injection wells, and that was a huge mistake because every time the pumps turned on, it was like a big diesel truck going out. And so we still have 23 of these that do not have injection wells, but now the new standard, even back at the county, is injection wells, right? Because you have to treat that first flush. But I didn't take these photos. These were sent to me, right? And so be known in the community as, hey, look, you see something, say something to me. I'll see what I can do. And so this has led me to have to become the expert in a lot of things. I am trained in cybersecurity. I have a business degree. I've never had any courses on sustainability or infrastructure, but it's not that hard. I mean, I couldn't tell you that I can build any of this stuff, but it's not that hard to understand if you dig down a little bit. So I've become an expert in stormwater pollution controls and effective recycling labels because of those problems that we saw before. I don't know why anybody else can't figure this out, but in the city, it's a little frustrating. But this is our opportunity, right? Okay, Municode. Does anybody know how to find your ordinances and your laws within the village? Municode is your friend. I made a mistake once where I was presented this policy, and I looked it up in Municode because I was going to kind of rewrite it. I'm like, oh, it's already in code. It's just not being enforced. So now I make sure that I read up what our ordinances already say. In fact, in 2013, we passed our recycling ordinance, which requires all of the bins to be labeled. 12 years later, nobody's following that, right? But now it's easy to just follow back up on that and hey, this is a law. Let's get code enforcement out there, right? Or let's have a conversation with the waste haulers first. That's the volume knob, by the way. You don't just go out and start ticketing them. You call them in first and you have a conversation hey, here's what we see. You go to the person who is responsible for that and you try to get the change. And if you don't get anywhere, maybe you have to call a commissioner, maybe you have to call solid waste. And then by the time you get on, volume knob 8 with me, Louis Aguirre's got a microphone in front of you. And you're going to be on Don't Trash Our Treasure on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. Okay, ChatGPT can be very helpful. Let me give you an example of something that I did here. My prompt was, I need to write a motion for a non-binding sustainability committee to the commission requesting it to update the city's special event permit requirements. Future special events that take place on city property must develop and submit a waste reduction, waste diversion, and sanitation plan, which should be approved by both Public Works and the Office of Resiliency before the permit is issued. And here is all of the things that the plan should include. And guess what? It spit out a wonderful motion that I then had to go edit. It's going to get you 80–90% there. You fine tune it, you edit everything. You don't have it do the work for you, but you have it write it up in a nice way. And that has been extremely helpful for me. Okay, standing items. A lot of these problems are big and they're going to take a while. So on all of the committees that I serve, we have a section in the agenda for updates or standing items. For example, in Miami Beach, we have had in the Parkview Island area in the 70s, they've had a no contact with water for over 5 years. Too much bacteria in the water. We've got this brand new kayak launch. Then we had a big sewer break, and ever since then, nobody can use the kayak launch. And so we have a recurring update from staff on a quarterly basis. We don't make these updates every month. We have the updates every quarter just because things take time. But we have a discussion on the status of the Parkview Island, what's been discovered, and what action is being taken. We are just reminding people about the issues that we need to continue focusing on. These things are not just, I'm going to take it up at the meeting, we're going to do what we're going to do, we're going to say what we're going to say, maybe we pass a motion and then we go away and next month we have a completely different topic. You have to stay on top of these things because people are busy and sometimes they don't actually want to do them. But if they're important enough, then you just keep reminding them, keep asking, and they will come up with the answer. Also, you have to stay around long enough to bridge the turnover of elected officials and staff. Congratulations to the commissioner who was reappointed last night or reelected yesterday. If you had a new person coming in a couple of years when his term is over, who's going to bridge that knowledge between what was happening on the commission today versus what's happening in the commission 4 years from now? And so as an example, in 2017, we took up an item on electric trolleys. We have a trolley service in Miami Beach, and we wanted to make sure that we wanted to give the trolley companies enough time to know that we wanted to go electric, and our renewal was in 2025. Well, that renewal conversation is happening, and everybody seems to forget what we passed in 2017, right? One of the commissioners passed this. It was unanimous that we want electric trolleys instead of dirty diesel. But everybody forgot about that, not me. Sometimes you just need to ask questions. Sometimes you just need to ask questions. Not everything is emotion, not everything is a policy. Sometimes just asking the questions is enough. Let me give you 2 examples. First of all, in Miami Beach, we have a lot of special events, and they happen on city property. Our city does something wonderful. They have a public opportunity to be heard. They have a meeting once a month on all of the special event permits for the community to ask questions. Well, I show up. I can't get the city to demand a waste reduction and diversion plan. So what do? I just show up at these meetings, and depending on who's up there, if it's a regular event, I ask, can you tell me a little bit about how you plan to reduce your landfill waste and single-use plastics? Not to tell them that they have to do that, but they know I'm coming. They want their permit. Staff tells them, hey, this guy's going to ask you these questions. And so when you just show up on a consistent basis, they start figuring it out before I even have to ask these questions. If they're a marathon, how are you minimizing the use and distribution of single-use plastics for water? How are you going to prevent runners from littering cups and goo energy packs, right, along the pathway? And when I was on the Marine Waterfront Protection Authority, we have a lot of charter boats that businesses, and they had to come to us in order for approval before they got their business tax receipt, their BTR. They couldn't start business without coming in front of me. And we had to either approve or deny. So what did I do? Each committee member, you can kind of tell they have their own focus. One guy, John, always wants to hear about turning the volume down when they're coming into residential. Noise bothers him where he lives, and so that's why he joined the board. So great. I put a list of 13 questions together that answer all of the questions that are asked, because I don't like inconsistency. I want a consistent line of questioning so that we're making decisions. Are you part of the Plastic Free Miami Beach Business Incentive Campaign? I'm not going to deny them if they are not, but I'm starting a conversation. Having that conversation will get you a lot of the results you're looking for. Sometimes you need to put people on a journey. This is Dan Gelber. He was our mayor for 8 years. Before that, I took him on a cleanup when he was running for office, and I just showed him the problem. We took him on a cleanup, and he started the Plastic-Free MB Business Incentive Program, which then led to the Miami Beach Bandshell going plastic-free because it's a city venue, which then led to Miami Beach signing a soda and water contract with PepsiCo that was 100% plastic-free for all soda and water that was sold on city property, right? We took that deal from Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola refused to participate. They wouldn't give anything in aluminum. It was all plastic, and that didn't fit with the mayor's mantra. So the final thing is that what we're doing is long, it's tedious, it's a pain in the rear end sometimes, and you have to celebrate your wins. And so I recommend a win jar, either personally or for your committee. And at the end of the year, like when you have things that happen, write them down, put them in that jar, stick it away. At the end of the year, read them. And then you realize how much impact you can actually make, how much impact you have actually made. And that reinvigorates you and gets you ready for the next year. So I have 2 asks of you. Number 1 is join a cleanup, host a cleanup, or sign up for notifications at volunteercleanup.org. Number 2 is the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Coalition. If you like Biscayne Bay, I imagine you do, you're on a beautiful island surrounded by it, either join the Biscayne Bay Marine Health Coalition's newsletter or join our WhatsApp chat if you want to see what we're working on on. We're going to have our next summit in May 20 of 26. And so pick a cause, any cause, and do something about it. Thank you very much.
Sustainability! All right. Thank you, everybody. A couple of minutes and we'll go ahead and set up for panel number 2. Thank you. We have created a resource hub in online platform that's going to be accessible to anybody. The idea is that we have collaboration of information, whether it's legislation, educational material, video references, anything related to the topics that we're discussing today and beyond. We want to basically give access to everybody to have that information in a centralized database. So in case you need it or you feel like sharing it, it's there. So following up today's event, we will be posting that. It will be live, it will be active. Anything that you feel that you would like to contribute, maybe you attend an event, you speak at something, please feel free to share that and I will go ahead and upload it. So we're gonna go ahead and step into our second panel. Tom and I recently connected and he has been appointed as the director for the Center for Urban Community and Resilience at the University of Miami. Is a landscape architect by trade and has worked on projects all over the world. We are exceptionally excited to have him and him bringing his level of expertise for the types of projects he's been involved in and what he can offer in terms of solutions for here in South Florida. So gentlemen, I'll pass it along to you. And just so you guys are aware, this is gonna be a little bit more of a open dialogue kind of conversation. So Mike will probably wind up in your hand.
My name is Tom. So as of this summer, I started as the director of the Center for Urban and Community Design at the University of Miami. And that center was founded after Hurricane Andrew as a direct response to Andrew with the goal of embedding resilience in the community. The center has been dormant for a few years. We're bringing it back and better than ever. So we would love to find opportunities to collaborate with all of you. So please do reach out if you have some ideas. I also work for the School of Architecture where I teach studios and seminars, mostly focused on green infrastructure, landscape, the horizontal kind of environment, and what that looks like here in South Florida. So I'm very excited to be with you all today and to nerd out over water. And that's what this next panel is going to be about. So I want to invite Dave back up here. And as was mentioned by Derek, we're going to try and have more of a dialogue with you all because I think we have a lot of expertise in the room. So our goal here will be to really have a conversation as opposed to talk at you for the next hour. But we'll both be up here. So I guess to kick things off, no one here it's not going to be news to anyone here that we have a lot of unique water challenges here in South Florida, depending on where we are. So you have challenges with saltwater intrusion, you have challenges with stormwater management, we have freshwater and we have saltwater, and we have all of these edges and all of these terrains, rivers and bays, to think about. And I think that many of you in this room come from different parts of the region who have different specific challenges and unique needs. So the first prompt here that I want to think about with you all is, how are South Florida communities adapting their infrastructure to manage stormwater and prevent saltwater intrusion? And what innovative design or nature-based strategies have you attempted? Maybe you piloted something. Is there anything that you've found that has been uniquely successful in your communities?
So in Miami Beach, we, in 2010, the entire mayoral election was on flooding. Sea level rise, you know, we had sunny day flooding. It would rain an inch and people would be paddling down West Avenue in kayaks. And so the entire conversation was on the stormwater system and the need to do pumps and road raising. You know, Miami Beach in many areas is only about 2 feet above sea level on the west side of it. And so they started having a bunch of blue ribbon panels. And that's at the same time when I had discovered the marine debris crisis, and I had done my own little research project where I was paddling in the canal every Sunday, taking the same route at the same time. And because tides change, about week number 5, I'm paddling, and it was super low tide. And it was actually king tide season. And I paddle by this stormwater outfall, and the outfalls have these manatee grates on them to prevent the wildlife from swimming up. And it was completely clogged with trash. I get out of my kayak, I pull out my phone, and I start video recording. I'm pulling trash out, and then all of a sudden I start seeing water flowing. And That's when I kind of, my aha moment, because I really didn't realize or make the connection to what, that the stormwater systems leading from our streets go out and they end up pouring out into the bay. And so I go into the first Blue Ribbon committee and with 3 plastic bags full of sopping, gooey, goopy trash that I pulled out of the outfall. And that's when I learned that when I started asking questions, that we were only cleaning our stormwater systems once every 7 years. And we actually hadn't done any for the past year. And so during this whole conversation where Miami Beach is ground zero for climate change, we embarked on this transformational project to switch from our old legacy gravity fed, which I think most everybody's still using here in Miami, to pump stations, one-way valves at the outfalls, and improved stormwater maintenance. You know, there's a lot of people in a highly urbanized area. A lot of trash gets on the streets and it goes in. And so I've discovered that all around the county, most municipalities are still only cleaning their stormwater systems about once every 5 to 7 years. It's within state guidelines, but is inferior. And so the new stormwater designs of these vortex structures, which swirl everything around, were promised to me to be the solution to all of my trash and pollution, and I realized that it was not. It is one part of a treatment train, where the first step is you have just bars and racks that catch the trash. Then you've got the vortex units, then you've got another thing, and then you're supposed to have an injection well to capture the first flush, which is all of the pollutants, the oils and stuff like that. And so the first 23 pump stations were built without those. There was a blowout, and so our engineer at the time convinced Miami-Dade County DERM that injection wells no longer work on the island, and that turned out to be false. They weren't cleaning the injection wells, and so the thing had a blowout because it was clogged full of trash. But meanwhile, but that is now in the new architecture. But that's still gray infrastructure.
It's very hard.
Right?
Very hard. Yeah.
And in order to build and raise some of those streets, we tore out mangroves to build a new seawall so that we could then raise the roads on Indian Creek, and that was a whole big debacle because that engineer doesn't like to build anything but straight walls, and that was his argument on it. So.
Well, I'm fairly new to South Florida. I've spent a lot of time in Florida. I have a lot of family in Florida, but not necessarily in South Florida. And I live in Coconut Grove, and one of the things that has been surprising to me with this particularly rainy summer that we had was seeing how quickly the water is standing in the streets. And as a landscape architect, my first thought was, well, where is the stormwater, the surface green infrastructure system that could help to alleviate some of these challenges, reduce velocity, hold on to that initial storm, clean the water before it ends up into that system you're talking about. And understanding that there are some unique challenges here related to the high water table, the soil types. But I am curious if you have any thoughts about green infrastructure and how that might play a role. And I also see we have a question. We had someone raising their hand over here. This might be a good opportunity for us to go over there. But you want to answer?
Yeah, let me just answer that real quickly because here's an opportunity for everybody. I started seeing pictures on Facebook where people were complaining that the streets were flooding. And all you saw in this picture, you see water where the street is, and then on either side you see mounds of grass, and then you see the sidewalk flooded, and then you see mounds of grass at the homes. So those spaces between the street and the sidewalk are supposed to be concave. They are supposed to be retention for that groundwater so that it goes into the ground. And so we spent a whole lot of time talking about how we are going to connect people's homes or their yards into the stormwater systems instead of doing what we're supposed to do, which is green infrastructure from like decades ago, the most fundamental is you just want to have pervious surface to where the water can drain down into the water tables.
Well,
And we're not doing that.
Yeah, and it's in this case, it's also about redundancy, right? So you have the gray infrastructure system plus a green infrastructure system so that they support each other as opposed to being a one or the other.
Hi, we don't know each other, but I work for UN too. I'm the sustainability director over there, and a lot of people in the room. I want to echo what Dave is saying by two examples that we have on the main campus in Coral Gables, where we had choices, but the right choices was made. I'm not saying that every building at UN is the right way to build, but those two examples are really a good example of what can be done. Okay, it's UM. Maybe you cannot do that everywhere because it requires some upfront cost, but it is definitely a good example of stormwater management with the nature-based solution. So the first one is Lakeside Village, which is like a huge new dorm. I call it dorm. They say it's a residential college, which was basically built with resilience in mind. So all on stilts. So multi-use. Obviously, you have even a hairdresser on the first floor. For a residential college, not very usual, but we have all this in there. And everybody living on the second, third, sixth floor. And then the landscaping was amazing, not only for heat purposes, because you have a lot of shading, so that's another issue that we can talk about, but definitely extreme heat is becoming the big problem, but also stormwater. And I think that's an example of what can be done, is basically all the interior of that complex was done with a lot of berm, a lot of rain gardens, and rain gardens that were planted with natives, like basically the emulation of what a cypress pond is in Big Cypress. It's really what it is. So it's hybrid because we still want people to be able to get to their homes if there's a big flooding. So there is some drainage system, but it's a hybrid one. And so most of like big rains can be absorbed by just the ponds themselves, which are empty most of the time. There's no rain. But when it rains a lot, it's very helpful. Another example is kind of the same thing that happened when we built the student services building, which is a LEED. All those buildings are LEED certified because we have a mandate, so LEED silver at minimum. Those two are gold. And this building had an entrance that was flooding all the time. And so obviously, like any of our project managers, when they look at this, they think about hardscape first, how we can get rid of the water, pump it, do something to get rid of it. And I was like, you know what, at FIU, I remember they had done something where they created a cypress pond, basically. Maybe not for that specific purpose of get rid of flooding, but still, I was like, well, that's a perfect space for a cypress pond, basically.
Yeah, those are great examples. And the Lakeside Village example, I take my students there to show them how stormwater can work. A hierarchy of stormwater detention solutions that then feed into a larger system for when that's necessary. So thanks. A larger system for when that's necessary. So thanks for that example. If there are no other, there we go, great.
I was just going to comment a little bit about what Dave was talking about with the fact that the stormwater systems are getting clogged with all the trash. Another component that's adding to that problem is the fact that cities don't use street sweepers very much anymore because they rely upon the cars to push all the debris to the side of the road. Where cyclists like myself are always getting flat tires from all the debris there. But what happens is all the debris, once it's on the side of the road, they're relying upon the storm sewers to get rid of everything. So if we invest in the street sweepers, we would be able to reduce a lot of the trash that's in them going out into the bay.
Yeah, I actually have a task for everyone here. Go back to your cities and ask your public works folks, have a good conversation about their street sweeping program. Look at the maps, not just the primary roads, but also the secondary roads and the tertiary roads, the ones in the in the residential areas. They need to be cleaning the streets on a frequent basis, right? Build out a plan because it is the cheapest and easiest way to keep debris out of Biscayne Bay. And it's not just trash, it is all of the things that end up in the road, including dirt. The second thing you want to have a conversation about is their stormwater cleaning program. The frequency, how they decide how frequently to clean. Because even in Miami Beach, where we're doing it once a year, there's a lot of hot spots where trash and debris accumulates. So that is a task for you guys. I can actually tell you because each municipality submits an annual report up to the state. And so you can look that up yourself. Many are doing a lot better. I don't know the answer for Guy Biscayne. I saw a public works guy here earlier. I won't put him on the spot, but it's my understanding that Guy Biscayne is doing a much better job than a lot of other municipalities. But the question is it enough? Right? You need the infrastructure to capture that debris and trash, and then you need to maintain it. You can spend $500 million like we did in Miami Beach, but if you don't clean it, you're going to flood, right? The second thing is that the county, I worked on this on the watershed board, on the design criteria and the maintenance requirements, and that was folded into our county's impervious surface ordinance. So this idea where people can evacuate the water into our public roads is no longer, really. It's not really an option. It should not have been an option. The new rules say that you are supposed to retain all of the water from a 25-year storm on your property. You have to build that in. Obviously, if this is only for new construction or major redesigns, that is on pause because of a state bill right now. But it's a reasonable policy to say that you can't just concrete over your entire plot and then expect the city or your neighbors to deal with your water. So even though that is on pause until Miami-Dade County needs to be suing, I think they're a little gun shy about that, but that is a policy that we should be looking towards because it will be resolved. And we need to think about how we manage our water. And I think we're getting a little too reliant on we can't get our toes wet. I think that there are going to be some areas that have to flood. We just did there's a new building on 5th and Alton. They wanted to go up 40 stories, and so they built a park next to it as a part of the community benefit. And they built a wonderful stormwater retention pond, and the park itself, certain areas are designed to flood and capture that water because one of the Biscayne Bay Task Force report goals, I think it's like 3G, is to eliminate direct discharges into Biscayne Bay of stormwater. That's the goal, right? Because all of that stuff, all of that water is not clean, and it's really difficult to clean that water.
Yeah, and a couple of examples I think that we might be able to look to moving forward. So Jose Marti Park, if they're able to construct that in the coming years, one of the design solutions that they have embedded in there is a series of baffle boxes that will hopefully eliminate that contaminated, the trash, the garbage before it gets into the Miami River. The Bay of Sarasota already implemented this. They built that project, I think, in 2023, and they have a series of baffle boxes that are doing that. And one of the things I think is really interesting about those projects is that they're calling them exposed baffle boxes, meaning they have like a glass top, so people walking through the community can see in real time how their trash is being diverted from the water body. Kind of a nerdy solution for any of the engineers in the room. But another one that I really like is just finding novel ways to use existing low-tech things that we have every day. So there's this really great project in New York City called Hunters Point South, which is a park. It's a waterfront park. And they implemented dozens of solutions, some of which are expensive innovations, some of which are very affordable. A few that I really like, one is this, they have this linear bike path, and along it they have this stormwater swale. But rather than just designing a typical stormwater swale with soil, they embedded a gabion wall inside that swale. Does anyone here know what a gabion wall is? Am I being way too nerdy right now? Okay. It's like a chicken wire, rectangular type of thing filled with rock. And by embedding that at the surface level, so you're hiding it with planting, it increases the surface area for water storage, but it also reduces the velocity of the water, can hold more water. So taking a really old, like even ancient technology and embedding that into the stormwater system. But they also did a lot of other things that I wonder if anyone here has experimented with, like how about silva cells or soil cells? Has anyone encountered those? They're basically like, think about like a milk crate, not to date myself, but like a milk crate, but you put it below your paving. And what it does is it basically allows you to have then a suspended paving system, so you can have less compacted soil underneath the paving, because as we know, when you drive or walk on top of paving, you compact the soil. So it increases the root zone for your trees, which helps with the heat island issues, but it also enables a greater porosity below ground for stormwater to be held. And bonus points if you use permeable pavers or some sort of porous paving above that to allow for even more infiltration. So there are a lot of solutions that we have, some of which are a little more expensive, like a soil cell is something you're adding below ground that no one can see. So explaining to your constituents the value of that additional expense per linear foot is challenging sometimes. But perhaps if they don't see, standing nuisance floodwater, that might be beneficial.
Is anyone here from Coral Gables? Maybe you want to tell us about what you guys have done with Miracle Mile. Wow, what is that? What is pedestrian area? Geraldo?
Both.
Oh.
I wish Matt was here. He would have a lot more details. But I do know that the city, I've only been with the city 3 years. They redid these things I think it's almost 8 years ago now. But basically they redid both Geraldo and Miracle Mile and implemented just common sense basic things. They raised the roads a little bit. They have grids on our sewer openings, so that way the trash gets caught there. The city still does do street sweeping, so they catch a lot of the trash there. And we also contract a company called Block by Block, dedicated both to Miracle Mile and to Geraldo, and they are out there every single day. So they pick up the trash. I meet with them every single week, well, every other week, and we make sure that we're addressing all of those issues. And they also help us with recycling as well currently. Hopefully that answered the question or helped a little bit.
Yeah, actually, I did see Matt's presentation and discussion on it. It looked like to be like a really exciting project where they started off with certain goals, right? The goals are, we want the water to percolate down, we want to reduce flooding, but we want to live with water. And so they started with that basic premise, and then they designed around that. A lot of times when you're trying to retrofit, it's a bit harder. But when you're starting and you're doing a major project that's going to renovate everything, you're going to tear everything up, that's a really great opportunity to be asking those questions. And what I learned the other day in North Bay Village's stormwater program, we had this contractor coming in and talking about all of the, I heard probably the word sustainability and clean water come out of his mouth about 6 times. And then I pull out the stormwater master plan on my phone and I'm like, oh, you know what? I haven't looked at this. They're talking about, oh, you're going to be happy, Dave. They've got injection wells. And so I started looking at the nutrient reduction that they are proposing. And I'm like, you're just saying words. You're only reducing nutrient levels by 23%. Like, that's not very significant. And so the challenge is to not let people sell you, so to speak. And you have to look at the details, and there's a lot of buzzwords. They know coming into certain places that people care about water quality, so that's what they're going to talk about, right? But it doesn't mean that those solutions that they're really implementing, they're just going to tell you, talk about what they want you to talk about. So you have to look at the details, and you have to ask questions, and that's why you kind of have to become a little bit of an expert yourself, because some people try to really want to do a great job, and some people are just kind of
With the last few minutes we have, I want to share a few thoughts as to how we can move things forward collectively. So I think one of the things that I found in working with some different constituents around the U.S. specifically, other cities, is that when you can find ways to leverage multiple constituent needs into one project, it can increase your budget capacity for doing maybe a harder to implement solution. So an example I can give is I was working on a project in Salt Lake City called the Green Loop, and a lot of the goals of that project were around mobility and safe access for bicyclists and pedestrians. So they leveraged that particular type of funding, Safe Routes to Schools, federal grants from DOT. As they were doing it, they realized this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to completely tear up the street, redo everything below grade as well. Because if you're going to reclaim space from the right-of-way for vehicles, and you want to add, say, street trees, that might be in the way of a water main. And as we know, you don't want to plant trees with root systems really close to a water main. So they found ways to leverage different capital budgets towards making the solution last, right? And if you're doing something that's going to last 50 plus years, that's when it makes sense to do it. So finding ways to build a greater coalition behind your project. So it is about stormwater, but it's also about roadway safety, or maybe it's about placemaking, activation, business improvement, whatever it might be. Another thing that I think is really critical to these projects, and I think that Dave started to allude to it, is asking the right questions. So when you are writing an RFP, and I think there are probably many people in this room who are part of these processes, when you're writing an RFP or when you're doing a project kickoff, what are the challenges we're trying to solve with this project? Write them down. And, we all know the KISS method of goals, right? Or, making it measurable, making it something you have to stick to, and just writing it down and being very clear about it. As if it is about, we want to have 50% of the stormwater infiltration into groundwater rather than into a storm drain, right? As one example. That way, as you're going through the process of the project, right, a design team is going to have schematic design and design development and construction documentation. Throughout those phases, you can go back to those goals and say, okay, are we meeting those goals? And if not, it's a time to reassess whether or not the project is meeting those. And I think lastly, and just to leave you with this, you might be surprised where you might find coalitions. This summer, I was partaking in an executive leadership program in which we had one of the high-level leaders, a political appointee of the New York City Police Department. And these folks were required to basically outline something that they wanted to solve over the course of their time with this program. And I think we were all thinking, okay, this guy's in charge of counterterrorism, he's in charge of many of the really big challenges in New York City. It's going to be something related to that. No, his concern was stormwater flooding. And he had at the top of he was able to rattle off the numbers. Our storm system can handle this amount of water per hour. This is how much we're getting. He knew which intersections were flooding, which ones were causing health and safety concerns in his community. And he was already thinking about how he could deploy traffic cops, specifically during storm events, to reroute people around these challenges. So you might be surprised. You might find allies in unlikely places to help us with this work. And so, just keep that in mind as you're moving these projects forward.
2 points that I'll play off of. The first is probably one of the most amazing projects that I've seen, which sought community input and really built like the most amazing solution, is the Underline. If you haven't been to the Underline and checked it out, it's gorgeous. They have stormwater, they have retention for US1, they have native plants, they've got trees, they've got shade, they've got spaces for people to play, and they really went through a series of public meetings that was really well done. And I like when there's public meetings. I know that sometimes they can be a pain in the rear end, but that's when you get community input. And when people buy into things, you tell them how much it's going to cost. They're like, yeah, but I want that, right? And so you get a lot more community buy-in. And there's a lot of really good ideas in the community, right? The second thing that I'll point out is that it is interesting about the coalitions, what you were talking about. And one of the things that I've learned how to do is to speak to people outside of the realm of sustainability. Not everybody cares so much in their number one priority about sustainability, But if you want to plant trees, you talk about heat for their kids to go, when they're playing soccer, they want to go sit under a shade tree for a little bit, right? You can talk about, if you talk to my dad about that, he'd be like, trees, But then you talk to him about squirrels, and then he'd be like, I like squirrels. So if you can find a way, my dad, he's like, squirrel. But I think if you can learn how to talk to people outside of the realm of sustainability, you're going to have a lot of success. Figure out what they care about and speak to that. And you don't have to say, well, what do you care about, right? Just through conversation. And you're going to get a lot more buy-in. And when you have buy-in from the community, a lot more things can happen. And it makes it much easier on the elected officials also.
Also, educating and getting feedback from citizens. I forgot honestly where I saw it. I even had a presentation a few years ago about it, but it's a citizen science kind of technique, which was very simple actually, to put some aluminium plaques on each of the storm drainage system openings, with a QR code and some kind of nice little funny thing that says, hey, if you see something, say something, kind of. And that's the way you collect, without having to do a public hearing. You have to do the public hearing. But on top of that, you can get a lot of feedback from citizens, maybe not all the citizens, but definitely when they see something weird like on the ground, and they can easily scan it, it's helpful. I'm not sure if it was successful because I didn't, I forgot the city where I saw it, but definitely something to include. It's low cost, I'm pretty sure, also in terms of.
Thank you so much. That was exceptionally informative. We are going to take another little break to set up for panel number 3. If you have any questions for Tom or Dave, please grab their ear and take advantage while we're here, while we have this little break. You have about 10 minutes, and then we'll set up for our final panel. Thank you very much. We're about to start panel number 3. I do want to mention that Teddy over there just fished out 2 aluminum cans from the regular trash. So I don't know if that was strategic. No, thank you. Yes. Maybe you have to get forensics in here.
If you can't do it, nobody can.
So, don't forget, we have those blue bins, those blue calc bins over there for the recycling specifically. So please, if you are using the aluminum can, make sure they find their way into one of those bins. Our final panel, we have a wonderful group of people. There are 4 on this one. Melissa will be moderating this, and I'm going to let our Michael Schmale, who's one of our board members, make the introduction. So thank you for this. And here we go, panel number 3.
It's a real pleasure to introduce Melissa Doyle, who I've known for many years, and she is the garbage girl, as we call her.
It's true.
If you want to talk trash, she is the person to talk to. And
Yes.
in fact, she's being a huge help to us on our sustainability board and to our public works department in helping us with some of the nitty-gritty of our recycling and solid waste contracts and issues. So it's been hugely helpful to us. Thank you for coming today, Melissa. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. So I've already warned Derek, I am the garbage girl. That's actually my email. And I've had that email since like 1990, so it's true. So I can talk trash all day. Please ask questions. I love what I do. I've been doing this for 35 years. Yes, 35 years. And I really enjoy it. My primary role is a division manager for the city of Fort Lauderdale, but I come largely from the private sector. I did 22 years with Big Garbage, including companies like Waste Management and Republic Services, in the operational side. So I understand how hauling operations work, landfills, transfer stations, waste-to-energy plants, all of that is in my wheelhouse. For the last 13 to 14 years, I've worked for the city of Fort Lauderdale, largely contractually managing most of their solid waste enterprises, but I also manage really sexy things besides garbage like biosolids and sludge and lime from the water softeners at the plants and dead animals. So nothing's off topic here. I was joking with Mike, the theme that has been consistent throughout the conversation today is trash touches everything. And one of the things I say all the time is there's 3 things in life that you can be assured of, and that's death, taxes, and trash. So with that, if I could, I'd like to invite our panel up and give them an opportunity to introduce themselves as well. Millie?
My name is Millie Milton. Really happy to be here and connect with many of you. My background is in marine science, and for the past 5 years, I've been developing and managing sustainability programs for live events and venues, specifically music festivals, sporting events, conferences. The programs that my team runs are largely comprehensive, but we do focus on waste quite a bit. It's something that's really tangible and important to the guest experience. So I usually say if I'm not in a dumpster, then it wasn't a day on site at the event. I do end up dumpster diving quite a bit. So really happy to be here.
Thank you. And Maddie?
Hi everyone, my name is Maddie Kaufman. I'm the Program and Outreach Director at Debris Free Oceans, which is a Miami-based nonprofit empowering communities to go zero waste. So we do education in schools, sustainability consulting, and my main hat right now is facilitating Zero Waste Miami, which is a coalition working to catalyze zero waste projects. I see many members of the coalition in the house, so I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you for that. And last but not least, Dave. Also a consistent theme today.
I promise you, I thought I was only supposed to be on like one of these panels, but that's all Karen. These are my friends. I've worked with them on many different projects, and I'm thrilled to always be on a panel with these two. I learned so much.
So some of the challenges that we face in solid waste is folks not understanding how solid waste moves and the impacts of what they're generating. The smartest way to manage your waste, obviously, is to be a smart consumer. But we know that that isn't always the way that things work residentially, commercially, or otherwise. With the work that I've been fortunate to be able to do so far with the village of Key Biscayne, a lot of the conversations that we have been focused on how are we collecting, how are we holding our vendors accountable, and how are we making sure that we're being true to what our residents and businesses expect of us here in the village of Key Biscayne. How do we know that when we're telling a vendor that something should be recycled, that it's truly getting to that end point? How do we know that we are collecting materials that are truly valuable and have a reuse or an end life? And more importantly, how are we making sure that we're accounting for those in a way that allows for flexibility and growth as the industry changes and as the politics change throughout the life of that contract? So when you do a residential or commercial solid waste contract through a municipal service, typically those are longer term contracts. Why? Because you're asking a company to make an investment. You want them to invest in trucks. Do you want a CNG truck? Do you want a landfill gas powered truck? Do you want an electric truck or a diesel truck? Those are conversations. There are implications and costs and potential restrictions that are tied to each of those decision points. What do you want to collect at the curb? We know that there's value to things like food waste, right, Millie? So there's an end market for that, but is that something that's efficient to be collecting? And if it is, how do you do that? If it's not efficient or something that makes sense today, if we don't have an infrastructure to support larger scale food composting today, how do we write a contract that gives us the flexibility to add it to make sure that we have the flexibility for those residents and businesses to take advantage of it? So garbage is a service. I often have said throughout my career that people flip a light switch and they expect the lights to go on. You turn the faucet and you want the water to work. You go and check your mailbox, you want your mail to be there. You put your cart out to the curb, you want it to be gone. So solid waste is at a crisis, and I think I heard Dave say that earlier. That's true, not only in Miami-Dade County, but also in Broward County, also in Monroe County. We don't have the infrastructure that we need to meet the demands and the expectations of our residents and our businesses. Smart contract writing, RFPs, RFQs, ITBs is really critical to start to develop the demand for that infrastructure and show that you have the feedstock to make some of those sustainable ways of managing what really is a waste resource and not solid waste happen in the right way moving towards the future. We all heard about the incinerator in Doral, catches fire, it's gone. What's Miami doing now? We're railing our garbage up to Okeechobee. That's not sustainable. Broward County doesn't even own solid waste assets with the exception of a landfill that is a class 3 or C&D landfill. Fort Lauderdale is the only city that has a segregated collection for yard waste. Those are things that are problems. So Broward is working on it, Dade is working on it, Monroe has no assets other than transfer stations. But we should be looking at it together. This is a Southeast sustainability meeting. And that's part of the conversation that we're hoping the folks in this room can start to have. So with that, I'd like to sort of pose, and maybe Millie, you can start. How do you think that we can develop smarter waste and recycling contracts, not only from a municipal perspective, but also relating to what you do or smaller businesses or campuses, that make sure that we are incorporating those sustainable options, but holding your contractors accountable to what you're asking them to deliver?
I think that the goal of my work has always been to see what lessons we can take from these large, complex and temporary events and see what lessons can be scaled to the municipal level. I think that going back to basics is kind of essential, although I wish that I could be talking about some innovative tech that's going to solve this problem, but really what I've found with our clients is building those relationships and understanding where the knowledge gaps are. Something that we've empowered our clients to remember is that they are the client in their waste management contract, right? So a project that Maddie and I, Debris Free Oceans and Ascendants, worked on in the city of Miami Beach this year, we found some really interesting knowledge gaps related to just limiting beliefs. These organizers, they're operations and logistics people, but for some reason there's when things get thrown in the recycling or trash bin, they turn off that part of their brain and they think that they don't have, some of the things that came out in these consultations was that we don't have control over what our vendors do. That is not true. When we're talking about private events, of course, that's not something that can scale directly to the municipality. Similarly, a limiting belief is that we can do everything right and we still can't control where, if these materials are recycled. Well, that is true. There are so many steps that can be taken. So an example from Ultra Music Festival, which is one of my clients, where we are really proud of how we operate our waste diversion program. We've achieved 100% acceptance of our recycling every year for 5 years. We've diverted over 400,000 pounds of waste, and an event of that scale is producing more waste than an average person or a small business would in a year in the course of one weekend. But we have our waste haulers on site with us. We have relationships with them. We have advanced meetings with the hauler, the waste management team, and our team, so that there is really this stewardship, and we know what happens when that material is moved off-site. Eliminating sources of contamination before they're even on our site is something that we hold all of our vendors to those contracts to really implement success across the site.
So I think that's a really great segue, and maybe, Maddie, this is a question for you. One of the challenges that I've seen over the years that I've been doing this is recycling streams change. right? It used to be you had the little 18-gallon bins and the driver would hand sort it, and now everything's single stream. It all goes into a big cart, and some people aren't great stewards of that and hide garbage bags or other things in there. We don't always do a great job, as Dave has already demonstrated in his slide deck, of indicating that it's recycling in the first place or what should go in there. So from your perspective, what things should we be looking at doing from an education perspective, and how can we simplify that process and incorporate that into what we do contractually to make that more successful?
This is I feel like the challenge everyone is trying to understand and trying to address. And one thing I always think about is back in 2021, the University of Georgia did a circularity study in Miami and found that the recycling contamination sources varied at a really micro level, where in Little Havana it was organics, in Coconut Grove it was packaging. And so you really need those micro level assessments and interventions to figure out what to target and how to change people's behavior. You also need to get creative and to get people's attentions that aren't sitting here in the room with us. A fun example, not related to recycling, we're currently partnering with the county to raise awareness on picking up after your pets. And so we did this whole event about, bringing out your pets. It was a carnival, there was a dog photo booth, vendors, and so hundreds of animal owners came out, but then we had a giant emoji poop costume that made the Miami Herald, and we talked about how this is a Biscayne Bay issue. And so now we're debris-free oceans. We have so many people doing cleanups now. We should just transition to doing these kind of niche events to target the communities of Miami, but then insert our zero waste and recycling lessons. And Dave can probably speak more on this, but he mentioned just labeling. That's kind of the easiest. We don't need this incredible technological solution to reduce contamination. We can just improve our labeling, and he's done a really great standardized labeling pilot in Miami Beach that had a lot of success.
And talk a little bit about this idea of greenwashing. One of the challenges that we find, you feel the same way about it I do. Oh, this is recyclable. Where? What market wants this? And so that's some of the challenge that we have, right? I mean, when we're doing a net zero waste plan, part of what we're looking at is trying to improve the circularity. If we're consuming it, we're going to recycle it, we're going to repurpose it, we're going to do something with it that adds value, that protects the natural resource. But that's not the way that people that manufacture materials always look at it. And so that's always a real challenge, particularly when you live in communities like we do in Southeast Florida, where we have so many visitors. And what gets recycled in Connecticut isn't the same thing that gets recycled in Kansas, and isn't what we can recycle here. And part of the challenge that I have found in my career, again, is trying to make sure that you keep contract language open enough that you can add or remove programs or items or things that are becoming more prevalent and that markets are beginning to develop to use, and the converse as well. One of my favorite things to talk about is the state has a 75% recycling goal, and their goal many years ago, which was pie in the sky many years ago, was that they wanted to have 75% recycling by 2020. Well, the state's barely kissing 30%. The state of Florida is at 14% period recycling across the state. That's pathetic. But there are some flaws in how that was calculated. Number one, it's done by weight. So how many of us get newspapers at home anymore? None of us. When you get packaging at the store, how much of it is in glass? Very little, unless you like your wine, and Mike, we like our wine. But the packaging has gotten smarter because the transportation costs have gotten more expensive, and the cost of those materials have gotten more expensive. Dave, maybe this is a great question for you, because plastics is one of the things that tends to be the bane of my existence. How do you tackle this idea of managing this greenwashing, wish cycling type of atmosphere that many of us are confronted with on a daily basis?
I think that focusing on the contracts, I'm just going to answer your first question first, then I'm going to answer your second question. I think that contracts between municipalities and the vendors or customers and their vendors is critical. In my conversations with the waste companies, they'll do whatever you ask. They're just going to charge you for it, right? And so in, where I live, there's a whole conversation about, like, apparently we have like this service where the staff actually go into your backyard and pull your carts out and trash valet, and apparently our mayor is very, very concerned about the costs of that continuing moving forward, and is really very curious about whether people are going to lose their minds that they're going to have to wheel their cart out, right? But nobody wants to pay for the service. When I got onto our Sustainability Resilience Task Force, one of the first conversations that I learned was that our waste contract was coming up. And I said, I want to see that contract. And there were so many opportunities that were missing from the contract that was provided from the vendor to our city that I had a field day redlining that contract and adding things. I think the biggest things that were missing were requirements of labeling, requirements of truck maintenance. In Miami Beach, we had a period of time where we had these garbage trucks leaking, dripping leachate, like this grossness, onto our streets. And we had a big crackdown on that, right? Well, that was not in the contract, that they had to inspect the trucks. On a regular basis, the drivers were required to inspect the trucks before they left, and I don't know, however they tested it. And I think that one of the other things that I really focused on is chain of custody, and ensuring that when a recycling truck picks up recycling, that it is actually dropped off at the recycling center, because there's only one MRF, right? There's only one company actually sorting material these days, and that's Waste Management. And so if you think about it from a business perspective, and I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but if a third-party waste hauler, and their only job is to drive material from one place to another, and they're going to drop it somewhere, they're going to drop it where they can make the most money, and that is a landfill. It's not dropping it at their competitor, who's going to charge them $100 a ton to drop the material. I think one of the other challenges in that scenario is that the waste haulers don't have a vested interest in that material being clean. If all they're doing is driving a truck from one place to another, they don't care what's in that bin. They don't care about the contamination and about reducing that contamination, because it doesn't cost them anything.
So that's kind of a great topic to chew into a little bit. So again, talking about the fact that things change, technology advances, there's a need or a want. And let's talk about Waste Management, because you're talking about their recovered material processing facility. We love acronyms in the garbage business. It's a RUMF. No, it's a RUMF.
Now I got to stick a new term in my...
Stick around, kid. So that happens to be located in Broward County, essentially on the county line in West Pembroke Pines. Brand new facility about to open in January. Waste Management happens to be our hauler in Fort Lauderdale. They have a vested interest in making sure that my contamination rates are as low as they can be. What happens when a driver's on a route? They go, they see a cart, it's a recycling cart, they dump the cart. Why? Because they want to make sure that they've done the service. It's clear there's a black plastic bag hanging out of it, there's a big block of styrofoam, there's a television. That driver is not going to get out, slap a sticker on it, and say, hey, I'm not going to get the cart, because the reality is they're going to be told, go back and get it when the resident calls, and the resident's going to pull all the stuff out, right? That's what happens. So they're going to get that cart. So Waste Management is one of the companies that is making an investment in AI. We've all heard about the wonders of AI and how that's being used effectively across many aspects of life. But they have cameras that have AI on the trucks. And so it will alert the driver and it will send a ping that says, hey, 10 Key Biscayne Boulevard had a issue with this recycle cart, it was contaminated. And that's incredibly helpful. The other thing that's been very interesting, because again, if there's a need, a want, or an expectation, it seems that the technology always happens to get caught up. And so recently, as of Friday, Waste Management is now accepting cups, reusable cups, solo cups, etc., in the recycling carts. And they have the ability to be able to recycle those. So for my 35 years of screaming at people, please don't put it in your cart, now I'm turning around going, please put it in your cart. And the same thing with other commodities that we generate. So don't just think about it from the typical, 5 items that we want you to put in your recycle bin, but think about it more universally. We generate a huge amount of food waste. 35% or more of what goes into the trash is food waste. We generate a ton, especially in Florida, of yard waste. You gotta have greens, you gotta have browns. It makes really good stuff. You may not have an outlet to process that on a large scale now, but in 10 years, I'll lay you $100, we do. Because there's a need for it. We don't have the infrastructure to manage what we're generating. Nobody wants a landfill or a waste to energy plant in their backyard. None of us do. It's not politically a sexy thing for a commission to have to vote on, and it's expensive. A new waste to energy plant is upwards of $1 billion. That's a lot of money to manage waste. So I think that as we begin to talk about exploring how you're looking at managing your waste, and the work that Millie is doing with getting out into the community at these music festivals and trying to ingrain that in the folks that are going, is to say, hey, stop and think about what you're doing. What are you generating? And is there a better way to be able to manage this material? And I think if I remember, today is a great example. We're using aluminum cans. Aluminum is infinitely recyclable. And a new can is recycled essentially within 30 days of you putting it in the recycle bin. Why do people use plastic? Because it's cheaper and it's easier. What's the number one thing that you probably see floating around outside of the storm drains in Biscayne Bay?
The number 2 is bottle caps. Number 4 is bottles. Number 1 is cigarette butts.
I was going to say cigarillo tips.
We have all the data on what's floating around. We've been documenting this data for decades. On your comment about the solo cups, I'm always excited to have conversations about recycling, and I notice there's always somebody said, okay, so the yogurt cups. I don't care about the yogurt cups. I understand that we're now starting to do these again. The problem is that people get hung up about the yogurt cups, yet they don't get the basics right. And so I have a completely different perspective on this. I think that we should only be telling people the 4 things we want in that recycling cart. Aluminum cans, plastic bottles where the neck is narrower than the body, cardboard and glass. That's it. I don't want anything else. No plastic bags, no styrofoam, none of that other stuff. Yogurt cups, don't talk to me about yogurt cups. I don't care about the pizza boxes. Here's why. The average everyday person is not going to care enough at this point to get it right and to get the nuance. Honestly, half the time I'm just glad that somebody puts trash in a can and not on the street. And so it is my perspective that you need to super simplify everything, and on those labels have a QR code where those of us in this room who want to have that conversation about the yogurt cup, solo cups, they will get into it. They're like, oh, okay, the pizza box, okay, I can recycle that.
So Maddie, how do you feel about that from a zero waste perspective?
I was going to say I was excited to answer your greenwashing question because I'm actually normally never really on recycling panels because we don't do a lot in the recycling space because a lot of recycling is greenwashed and like especially the plastics. Like there's so many different types of plastics, additives. Every time you recycle them, it loses quality. They leach more microplastics. They're more harmful to human health. Like I wish there was a comms person that could put together, because I do think recycling is important. So I'm like, how do we communicate that, but tell people that is not the solution. This is not your excuse to continue using these products.
But we know that the consumer, the tourist that's coming to Key Biscayne or that's going to Miami Beach or Fort Lauderdale Beach is going to have plastic bottles. It's going to happen. So what is your perspective on how that should be best managed? Because that's going to happen. How do we collect that and make that successful?
I would say this isn't really a recycling example, and I also will say reuse is the future and is in a lot of places, and a lot of people that come to Miami know to have their reusables and have reusable carry-out containers and cups in their cities, and so they actually kind of have to backtrack a little bit when they come here. But one thing top of mind, and this isn't like a scaled solution, but I really like the interactive art exhibits that are recycling waste bins. And so like, for example, you can have bins for having the World Cup. You can have bins for team 1 and team 2, and you put your plastic bottle in the bin that you're rooting for so you can root for your team. And so I think you can get creative to get folks to engage, but also, you know, understand that a lot of people do come from places that kind of properly do this. We just have to help them do it.
So Millie, talk a little bit about what you've been doing in the food composting space.
I'm going to pull a Maddie and say, can I hop back to one of the previous questions for just a second? Oh, actually, Dave did that first. We're all doing it. Just wanted to note, like, yeah, first of all, I agree with Dave, and I've seen that happen as well. When we simplify things, we actually have a better outcome and a controlled environment. An example is even paper, which is a really efficiently recycled material. At one point, we weren't collecting paper on site at an event for recycling because we had a meeting with WM, and they didn't want paper towels, but they said office paper is fine. We know if we put paper on the recycling bin, it's going to be all paper towels because not many people are even using office paper. So we made choices like that and, you know, decrease the contamination rather. I also wanted to touch on the greenwashing aspect if I can and tie it back to, you know, other sort of tactics. We're talking about contracts, but also what about like special event permitting, and is there greenwashing there? This is something that we saw in our program. This is something that our Miami Beach Sustainability Committee just talked about. But you know, if our special event permits or, you know, any other types of businesses that need permits, they're only required to put out recycling bins, make sure that they're paired with trash bins, and make sure that they have presence in food service areas. That's it. It's not lost on them that that doesn't mean anything, really. But they're just meeting the recycling special event requirements. So what about labeling? What about waste sorting? I don't know what the answer is there and how that does get integrated into permits, but it's yeah, it's an interesting challenge. Food waste reduction and recovery. To be clear, I'm not truly the expert. We work with compost service providers at our events, and I act as a liaison between event producers and the service provider, because there's not typically someone on the event production team that has a single brain cell to give towards these things. But yeah, I see food waste reduction at events and really in general as a zero regret program. People love it. It is one of the things. Maybe people are tired of hearing the word recycling. They're tired of hearing the word sustainability because it's just a buzzword. But like when you talk about food waste, it's really tangible. Everybody gets it. There's literally no one that would look at a plate of food and be like, yeah, that should just go in the trash. You know, we all we all get it. It's really easy to get people on board. It's really low cost. You just build out the capacity with your team and, you know, start with waste reduction strategies and then divert through donation programs or composting wherever you can. So I love it.
Is a great transition back to the idea of contracts. And how do you look at developing a contract that accomplishes not only what you're looking for today, but strategically supports where you're trying to go, even if some of those options or opportunities aren't available today. Food waste is certainly one of them. Electronics recycling is another one. A lot of us have drop-offs. You know, you can go to an electronics or a household hazardous waste event and load up your TV from 1995 in the back of your Blazer and go drop it off. Most people don't do that. If it's not convenient, they won't do it. We offer curbside recycling. And you put it out on your recycle day, you let us know it's there, and a separate truck comes and collects it. One of the things that I'm working with Tallulah on in the back, hey Lou, is textile recycling. And we're looking at doing a pilot program where we do it residentially. And we're talking about picking a neighborhood that mirrors a recycle route in each of our commission districts, and we do that collection once a quarter. And so those are things that weren't available to us 5 years ago, certainly not when I started in the garbage business at 19, but they're available today. And those are things that you should be thinking about when you are looking at or providing advice or you're collaborating on a renewal of a solid waste collection contract. The other thing we were talking about a little bit earlier at the table was the idea of being aware of where your materials are going. You know, Dave brought up, how do you know that your material in your recycling bin is really going to a recycle facility? WSVN just did a piece yesterday where they put air tags on a whole bunch of recycling in Pompano Beach, the Fort Lauderdale International Airport, Dania Beach, and there was one more. And 3 out of the 4 got recycled. The other one went to a landfill. I know why. I'm not going to say why, but I know why. And that's clearly a situation where that contract is not being enforced, and they're not holding that contractor at the level that they should be to what they're supposed to be doing. They're not being held accountable. So ask the questions. Know where it's going. Ask to see load slips. Ask where the material is being sent when it's bailed. You know, Dave makes a great point. Waste management really is the only RUMF available, and Miami-Dade is bringing their material there. So it's huge, and that's a really big benefit, but it's also a limitation. So think about where your garbage, your MSW, is being hauled. Maybe it's going to a landfill. If you have waste connections, it's going to a landfill. If you're in a city that participates with Miami-Dade, it's either going to Okeechobee landfill or it's being burned. And if you're in Broward County, it's either being hauled to an outside landfill or it's being burned. We can get through the pieces of which is better. That's really not the intent today. But with that, I see hands raised, and with permission, I'd like to go ahead and throw it to the audience. Great.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so you mentioned it. WM is opening this new facility. I visited it, our account rep, we're with WM at University of Miami. I'm here because I represent the City of Coral Gables with Diego, but I'm talking about UM. But the truth is, they're invested something like 80 million in that new facility. So they want clean stuff because China is not accepting. One of the reasons why we didn't care for so long is because China was accepting everything. Since 2017, I think, something, that China said, yeah, no more crap. It's either 0.5% contamination or nothing. They had to find new customers, new people to send their bales to. So I think they have a vested interest in making it work. And one of the big issue, you said it, they're going to accept number 5 plastic, but they're going to deal with plastic bags. but they don't want to advertise, yeah, let's have plastic bags, because it's gonna still be an issue anyway, because they're not gonna have people opening those plastic bags. And so one of the things that, going back to what Dave was saying, is you have to make it simple. One of the things we did last Saturday with our team at Hard Rock, not far from where you are, was to actually do a green game about recycle right. And the message was even dumber. It was nothing dirty, no plastic bags. And that's it. Yes, we didn't go into detail. You see some really crazy stuff in the MRF. Keeping the acronym over there, like, yeah. But that message for people that are there just to see the game, they don't want you to give them lessons about how they need to deal with their trash. You should, but they're not there for that. The message was super simple. Nothing dirty, no plastic bags, because we know that's what that new MRF is going to depend on to survive. We need to give it a chance, basically.
Let's also talk about the elephant in the room. It's more expensive to recycle than to throw it away in a landfill. So be aware of that, because that is the politics of trash as well. When you're revisiting a collection contract, you need to be prepared to make the argument to your electeds, to your city or town manager, and to your residents and businesses that there's a real cost associated with doing the right thing and managing your waste correctly. I think I saw, great.
Yeah. Melissa, what are you doing about educating your customers about the fact that Waste Management is going to run a garbage truck on a garbage route and take the same truck and run it on a recycling?
They do not. They do not. So one of the requirements that we have is we have GPS on every vehicle. Not only city vehicles, but also on the haulers' vehicles. And I have access, full access to their GPS. So we do that because, number one, I want to make sure that the routes are completed and they are completed within the appropriate timelines. And number two, it allows me to see where the trucks are moving and taking the material. So we have had issues with other haulers collecting garbage and yard waste, for instance, in the same truck because their buddy was running late or the landfill had a line that was too long, and so nobody will notice. That's not acceptable to the city of Fort Lauderdale. And the same thing with the recycling. Also, from an education perspective, we have what we call IML labels, and that's an in-mold label, and I think you had pictures of them on one of your slides, Dave, as well. But it's essentially a very graphic depiction of what you can place in each cart. Fort Lauderdale has 3 carts. We have a black cart for garbage, a green one for yard waste, and a recycling cart that's blue. Each of those carts has a label that's on the top of it that says in a picture what you put in the cart and what you don't. Interestingly, our yard waste carts are 96 gallon. But our trash carts are 65. So we also are trying to encourage with that weekly yard waste pickup that those materials aren't going in the bulk pile, that they aren't going in the trash bin, that they're going in the yard waste bin so that we know they're going to the yard waste site and getting ground and made into compost, because that's the intent of it and that's what the residents of Fort Lauderdale expect. And it's the same with our recycling. So the last thing that we do, which is a little unique, is we have a program called Take 5. And we go through our neighborhoods 3 weeks running, and we actually do hands-on inspections of the recycling and the yard waste carts. And if we see that you're putting something in a recycle cart that doesn't belong, we put a little friendly tag on it, and we turn the cart around so that the driver knows don't get it. And we say, hey, you had something in your cart that shouldn't be. We put it into our customer service system so that if the neighbor calls, that somebody can tell them what they did wrong. And we say, nice try, we're gonna come back next week to get your cart, please do better. And if they don't do better by week 3, their cart goes away. Because if you can't recycle correctly, you don't need to recycle. You can put everything into the trash.
That's cool.
Really quick, I wanted to say one thing real quick. Talk about
So like Teddy, I'm here with the city of Coral Gables, but I'm also a board member for a great nonprofit called Dream and Greet in Miami. A few years ago, we created an app called Recyclepedia. Everybody can download it. It's free, Recyclepedia. And the idea behind the app is it has an educational component for recycling, but you can type in almost any item that you can think of, a chair, a laptop, a TV, a couch, clothing, and the app will tell you how to recycle it correctly or get rid of it correctly. So if it's clothing, it'll give you Goodwill and different locations like that. If it's cables, it'll tell you Best Buy or Target, different places like that. So I encourage everybody to download it and try it. They just got a partnership with Miami-Dade County, so they're revamping the app. Right now, it's only Miami-Dade County, but the idea is to expand into Fort Lauderdale and Monroe eventually.
It's cool. Thank you for sharing.
So I have a question. I'm very concerned about trust in the system. A waste management truck, I'm not picking on anybody, they all look the same, trash and recycling. Do you require that the trucks have a big recycle, that this is a recycling truck, and another one that says this is a landfill truck, so that as people, like, it's starting to get to the point where people don't believe in the system, and then they stop doing it. Once they stop doing it, they're never going to do it again. And so I'm very concerned about people's perception that all this stuff's going to landfill anyway, so why bother?
So I think that that's a really great insight. And one of the challenges that I had when I first got to the city is because we had a hauler that was probably not doing what they should have been doing, is that we required that of the incoming contractor who replaced that hauler. And what that did do, to your point, is it built trust within the residents that were seeing those trucks go down the street, that recycling truck was picking up that recycling cart. But again, Fort Lauderdale and our residents are pretty astute folks, and they're not going to go through and send a truck through to get a recycle cart and then a separate truck to go through and get the garbage cart. What happens typically is that truck gets the garbage cart and they turn right around and get the recycle cart, and people see it. But the other thing that's important, talking about accountability and contracts and making sure that you're holding your contractor accountable, is you should be getting a copy of what they are depositing at each of those facilities. So one of the things I do in my spare time, because I love garbage, is I help other cities with their contracts. And there is a city that will remain nameless that wasn't going through that process, and it's a fairly big city in Broward County, and they were essentially contributing about 400 tons a month of recycling. They should have been somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,000. And it's because they weren't holding the vendor accountable, and the vendor was taking those materials straight to landfill and claiming that they were contaminated. The driver was making that decision in the field, but that isn't the case. And to your point, as a result, and the residents saw that, there's no trust. And so that was coming up at their commission meetings.
On the trucks, that your new contract, is that truck indicated that that's a recycling truck? It should be.
Not an issue in Fort Lauderdale, but one of the things that you'll hear me say if I ever have the opportunity to talk to you privately is each community is different. Every community has its own flavor, its own needs, its appetite for what it will want to see or not want to see. We have our own infrastructure. You know, Fort Lauderdale is a very urban downtown zero lot line environment. We do a lot of work with condos and apartment buildings and things like that. You know, our single family residential is just shy of 40,000, but we've got another 55,000 units that are multifamily, plus the 15,000+ commercial businesses in Fort Lauderdale. So what Fort Lauderdale does may or may not apply to what you're doing in Coral Gables or in the village of Key Biscayne. But there's almost always a common thread of what you can do to maybe look at things a little bit differently and to make sure that you're giving your residents, your business owners, your cities what they need to demonstrate that what they're paying is being returned with quality service and a sustainable way of managing your waste. And with that, I think I'm out of time. Derek's giving me the thumbs up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some amazing takeaways from today. We do have the room for about another 30 minutes, so please feel free to mingle, network, discuss with each other if you'd like anything to drink or eat. And again, if you please feel free to share your contact information so we can continue to share with you everything that was presented and discussed today. We want to keep this open dialogue. We want to keep the network growing and building. And from the bottom of my heart and the member of the Village of Biscayne and our board, thank you so much for coming. Much appreciated. Thank you.